Hello and welcome to Bite Back, the programme in which you, the viewer, take the programme makers to task. And there are hundreds of you who want to do exactly that, following Halloween night, when the BBC pretended to investigate the supernatural in Ghostwatch. The switchboard was jammed with complaints, reports that children were terrified, pregnant women had gone into labour, and intelligent people felt duped. Conversely, many of the 11 million who watched it thought it was a brilliant piece of television. Well, what was it? A treat or a dangerous trick? Viewers with me here in the studio will be having a spirited argument about that with the programme's producer, Ruth Baumgarten, and her boss, its executive producer, Richard Brooke. But first, you've heard of Crime Watch, Hospital Watch, Badger Watch. On Halloween night, it was Ghostwatch. It may seem laughable now that we know it was all a spoof, but on Saturday, October the 31st, thousands of people weren't so sure. It said it was live. It said it wanted to show us irrefutable proof that ghosts exist, and it gave us a telephone number to ring with our experiences of the paranormal. At one point, 20,000 people were trying to get through to the presenter, Michael Parkinson.
The programme you're about to watch is a unique live investigation of the supernatural. It contains material which some viewers may find to be disturbing.
The viewer was told that the Ghostwatch investigation would centre on supernatural activity at a house in Northolt in Middlesex. Michael Parkinson in the studio interviewed experts on the paranormal, and Sarah Green and Craig Charles were on location with the BBC outside broadcast unit at the supposedly haunted house. Sarah's husband Mike Smith was manning a studio phone-in.
We particularly want to hear from you if you've had any personal experiences of ghosts or the supernatural.
The story centred on Mrs. Pamela Early and her young daughters Suzanne and Kimmy. We were told that a university research team had been monitoring their home and that a particularly eventful night had been recorded on video. Later, it emerged that a man had committed suicide in the house some years earlier, and the studio expert suggested that his spirit was now entering the children. Indeed, before our eyes, they began to be increasingly affected.
Don't touch me. It's like a meat locker in here. It's so cold.
But we can't move because she's in agony and she won't even let me touch her.
I should tell you, if you joined to see the next programme, that in fact we're staying with what we have here from Foxhill Drive because the events are so remarkable and dramatic that we'll be staying with them for as long as we have to.
By the end of the programme, cameras and lights had ceased to work, the studio was deserted except for a confused Parkinson, and it was impossible to tell what had happened to Sarah Green. It's not the first time the public has believed drama to be real. The classic example is, of course, Orson Welles' radio version of War of the Worlds, when Americans were panicked into believing they were being invaded by aliens.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars.
Such was the power of radio in America in 1938. Nearly 20 years later, the power of television here proved as potent when Richard Dimbleby made an April Fool of the nation on Panorama.
The last 2 weeks of March are an anxious time for the spaghetti farmer. There's always the chance of a late frost, which, while not entirely ruining the crop, generally impairs the flavour.
Well, 35 years on from that, the BBC has done it again, made a lot of people feel very foolish. Ruth Baumgarten, you meant to fool people, though, didn't you? I mean, the whole piece wouldn't have worked unless people were taken in.
No, we never meant to fool the audience. We meant to create a good ghost story for Halloween. We wrote a screenplay, we rewrote it countless times, we invented this family, and we thought this would be the ideal contemporary setting for a modern ghost story.
But you didn't use actors, you used factual presenters. You meant people to be deceived.
We billed it as drama, and we surrounded the factual presenters with actors who had appeared that very week in some of the most popular programs on television, like Casualty, in commercials, so that we felt that apart from really making sure that every possible way, short of having arrows inside the programme, was taken to tell the audience that this is drama.
but not all of them spotted that, and some of them are here. Just one second. Let me bring in Mr. Lenger there, Eden Lenger. You saw it. You were taken in. What's your reaction?
Yes, Sue, thank you. Firstly, I must just say the kind word is that it was actually theoretically a brilliant piece of television. That's the nice part out of the way. But I also think that you betrayed the trust that the audience has within the BBC. You toyed with the emotions of the audience because the audience weren't actually sure, or I wasn't, actually sure if it was fact or fiction, if it was live or if it was in fact a drama. There were allusions before the programme, and in some of the papers, I don't get the Radio Times, many people don't either, I hate to say, that it was, you weren't sure because it was Michael Parkinson and the others, whether it was fact or fiction, and as the programme went on, it became obvious you were getting sucked in addition to which...
Well, hang on, you made a lot of points there, and I'm sure other people want to make some as well, and I want some answers. But let me bring in Susie Dixon over there, because you watched it with your two small sons, yes?
Yes, that's right. I was actually under no illusion at all that it was a spoof. I read as many reviews as I could, and we actually built our Saturday night with the children around watching it.
But your son was upset?
Yes. Within 5 minutes, nothing had happened. He reacted instantly. He was very distressed instantly to something very sinister in the presentation, and nothing had actually happened. And I think you mentioned that you were anxious to put it against the ghost story, against a contemporary background. I think it's that, actually, that made it most sinister. It was the background that most people in this country live in.
Richard Brooke, I mean, that is the problem, that it was very realistic, and whatever was intended, it did fool an awful lot of the people, and there isn't any such thing as the watershed in the real world.
Well, I think there is such a thing as the watershed in the real world. The BBC have this policy. They're very clear about it. I'm very sorry that any children watch this. It was unsuitable for children. Let me make that completely clear. We have no worries about that point. The watershed begins at 9 o'clock. This policy is published in the Radio Times every week, and the BBC also use other arenas to make this policy clear. I don't think it's fair to say we hide behind it. It's a published policy. It begins at 9 o'clock. This programme began at 9:25. Nothing very bad happened in it for about 40 minutes, though I take your point, and I must respect it, that you say there was a sinister atmosphere in the presentation, but I have never thought that particularly about it.
Martin Plum, you want to make a point?
I didn't know it was a drama. I've got 3 children, 14, 12 and 10, and Michael Parkinson is a well-respected and mature fatherly figure. Sarah Green and Mike Smith are synonymous with children's television. Yeah. I looked at the start of it, vetted it, and thought, and they weren't unsupervised, they were watching it with my mother-in-law, and I just thought that it was going to be a very safe...
And were they frightened?
Well, yes, I mean, to the degree that I agree that nothing sinister happened for 40 minutes, but I was working with my wife in another room, and my youngest child, who was 10, rushed out of the room, vomited in the hall, was absolutely ashen-faced, wouldn't even talk about the thing for 2 or 3 hours. It was at 1 o'clock in the morning that I got her to talk about it, and she wouldn't sleep in her own bed for 2 nights.
What about you now, you 3 girls on the front? Natasha McPeak, you watched it. What did you think of it?
Well, I thought it was one sick joke, the way that it was based around children, the way that the children were involved in the actual story. Why did you have to bring the children into it? But it wasn't funny. It wasn't funny at all.
It is a question, I think, Ruth. I mean, a lot of people have written in and rung in saying this is a question of bad taste in the end, that you couldn't have had... Why couldn't you have had a kind of common-a-garden criminal as the poltergeist? In the end, it was a child molester who possessed children because they were in puberty. I mean, is that good taste?
We built warnings into the programme. The first thing which Michael Parkinson said, don't watch, this is disturbing. 20 minutes into the programme, he repeats it. And later on, he actually says to a fictitious telephone caller, switch the television on, send your children to bed if they're disturbed.
Let Mr. Story make a point now.
I feel the real reason for including that statement from Michael Parkinson is really to create dramatic effect and not really a genuine sort of statement to warn people about the nature of the programme. It creates a very heightened sense of drama.